This is Study Time Routines by Victoria, Drew, Riley, Chris, and Joe.
How not having a good study routine can affect creating a barrier to success. A student who doesn't study is badly impacted and it results poorly in grades. How self esteem and a diminished sense of morality. Grades are the first thing to suffer if students don't study. Students can learn and develop beyond what they initially perceive or read when they study.
Why I think studying is important. Creating a good study routine is very important to success as a student in the real world. Studying helps improve retention in students, making it easier for them to retain information. Studying also better prepares students for things like tests and exams, leading to higher grades. Being able to manage time effectively is a skill that can be applied outside of the classroom. Studying increases brain power and creates a higher IQ overall with the ability to remember information better. Creating good study habits will help students have more time to themselves for other things and make them feel more productive. My study routines. In order to study for exams and tests, I always go to a place that's outside of my dorm room. I feel I get easily distracted when I try to focus in my room, so I like to go places such as the library and Starbucks. To retain information, I use my iPad to write my notes so I remember them better. I also try to do practice exams that my teachers give me and go over questions from homework and classworks to be able to apply the information I'm studying. I feel like applying information is a good way to retain it as efficiently as possible.
Why studying is important to me. Study routines are important to me as a future nursing student. I believe it is something everyone should have. Studying does not only help make me feel productive, but also helps with my mental health. Students who study are proven to excel throughout school, whether it is in class, taking an exam or quiz, or just learning the material. Compared to students who do not study, they will not improve their academic skills. As a student who used to never take time out of each week to study, who now comes to the library and studies at least 3 times a week for at least an hour, has realized how much this has impacted my learning, focus, and grades. My study routines. As a student who has studied routines, I try and come to the library 2 or 3 times a week to either work on my assignments or to study for exams that are coming up. I also meet with friends who are in my higher level classes at least once a week. That way we can review what we all have learned or have been struggling with and to study for exams.
Why I think studying is important. I think studying and having a routine is important for a lot of things. One main reason forces you to stay on top of your class and schoolwork, because if you were to get behind or miss a few days of school, when you get back into the class, you won't be completely lost and you will have a little idea of what's being going over in class. Another one is that studying can take unnecessary stress away that you could get from tests, and just it help you be more prepared for your tests and quizzes. And then last thing, as an athlete, it's important to study and have a routine, because at the end of the day, if you don't have good grades enough, you won't play or you'll get cut. My study routines, some of my study habits as being an athlete consist at the end of the day is when I usually will go get my work done, studying done, and homework done. While I'm studying, I will always listen to music. Another routine is that I will usually go class by class and knock out homework for that day, or if it's due in the next few days. This is most of the time I will wait to the end of the day to do my studying, but there's also sometimes if I find a little break in between my classes, I will go to our study hall and get some studying in. I would say my routine is mostly getting stuff done at night and working alone, because that's when I have my break from baseball and people.
Why I think studying is important. Studying allows people to learn topics in depth and focus on what their class is trying to show them. Results on tests, quizzes, essays, and any other assignments in school will get better with studying. Studying also helps with future careers and jobs. Researching what the company's core values are and what is required in order to get hired will put someone above the rest of the other candidates. Study routines. For my study routine, I try to assign a specific day of the week where I know I have nothing to do and not a lot of classes to get as much homework/studying as I can done. I will complete the easiest and less time-consuming assignments first, then go class by class for the week to see what needs to be done. In between assignments, I will take a break for 5 to 10 minutes just so I can make sure I retain all of the material I went over. After this, I will focus completely on the hardest class I have at the time to make sure I get the material we learn.
Why I think having a dedicated study time and routine is good. Having a scheduled routine in which to further academic studies allows the time needed to both wind down and get serious into compartmentalized sections. As such, the two crucial times do not overlap, thus creating unnecessary strain on the mind. A routine especially makes sure that procrastination becomes a non-factor, as by repeatedly studying over and over at a specific time, the body becomes accustomed to, at the very least, making bare minimum strides in learning. That's what I believe to be the biggest draw toward having a dedicated study schedule, as I am egregiously bad at slacking off during randomly increasing intervals if I don't have a consistent foundation. A nice offset to that is I'm more or less comfortable studying anywhere. My study time / routine. Once all of my classes have ended for the day, usually around 2 or 3 p.m., I like to wait 30 minutes for my brain to decompress before engaging in study time. I'm not the person to study all at once, so I make sure to take 5-minute breaks over 30-minute intervals. The subjects in question that I'm studying mainly depend on how close the date for a specific event, whether a test or a major assignment, is in relation to that day. The latest this goes on for is around 10:30 at night, right as my cerebral cortex begins to have the same consistency as pudding. For weekends, I like to start at the same time just to keep in schedule for the rest of the week, as well as allot me some more me time in the mornings.
For our interview, we all chose separate peers and gave them a question to answer. So the first one is, what do you do to prevent procrastination? And the response was, to prevent procrastination, every Sunday I go through my assignments for the next week and write in my calendar what I have due for the week. I set aside times throughout the week to either study or do assignments depending on what I have due. The next question is, how do you create good sleeping habits to make sure you are well rested? And the response was, to make sure I am well rested, I try to go to bed around the same time each night and go through the same routine before bed so my body gets adjusted to the schedule. I will also try to wake up at the same time every day.
What does a good study environment look like to you? A good study environment for me is a quiet public place where other people are also doing work. I prefer no one to be with me and soft music to be playing in my AirPods. Do you prefer writing or typing your notes, and why? Writing notes always helps me understand the material better and is much easier to just look at whenever compared to pulling up a computer screen each time there's a need for me to study. Also just more used to reading than typing. Do you think studying with your friends is beneficial? Yes, because it changes the environment and they can help you study and quiz you.
When I was first learning to meditate, the instruction was to simply pay attention to my breath, and when my mind wandered, to bring it back. Sounded simple enough, yet I'd sit on these silent retreats, sweating through t-shirts in the middle of winter. I'd take naps every chance I got because it was really hard work. Actually, it was exhausting. The instruction was simple enough, but I was missing something really important. So why is it so hard to pay attention? Well, studies show that even when we're really trying to pay attention to something, like maybe this talk, at some point about half of us will drift off into a daydream or have this urge to check our Twitter feed. So what's going on here? It turns out that we're fighting one of the most evolutionarily conserved learning processes currently known in science, one that's conserved back to the most basic nervous systems known to man. This reward-based learning process is called positive and negative reinforcement and basically goes like this. We see some food that looks good. Our brain says, calories, survival. We eat the food, we taste it, it tastes good. And especially with sugar, our bodies send a signal to our brain that says, remember what you're eating and where you found it. We lay down this context-dependent memory and learn to repeat the process next time. See food, eat food, feel good, repeat. Trigger, behavior, reward. Simple, right? Well, after a while, our creative brains say, you know what? You can use this for more than just remembering where food is. You know, next time you feel bad, Why don't you try eating something good so you'll feel better? We thank our brains for the great idea. Try this and quickly learn that if we eat chocolate or ice cream when we're mad or sad, we feel better. Same process, just a different trigger. Instead of this hunger signal coming from our stomach, this emotional signal, feeling sad, triggers that urge to eat. Maybe in our teenage years, we were a nerd at school, and we see those rebel kids outside smoking, we think, hey, I want to be cool, so we start smoking. The Marlboro Man wasn't a dork, and that was no accident. See cool, smoke to be cool, feel good. Repeat. Trigger, behavior, reward. And each time we do this, we learn to repeat the process, and it becomes a habit. So later, feeling stressed out triggers that urge to smoke a cigarette or to eat something sweet. Now with these same brain processes, we've gone from learning to survive to literally killing ourselves with these habits. Obesity and smoking are among the leading preventable causes of morbidity and mortality in the world. So back to my breath. What if instead of fighting our brains or trying to force ourselves to pay attention, we instead tapped into this natural reward-based learning process, but added a twist? What if instead we just got really curious about what was happening in our momentary experience? I'll give you an example. In my lab, we studied whether mindfulness training could help people quit smoking. Now, just like trying to force myself to pay attention to my breath, they could try to force themselves to quit smoking. And the majority of them had tried this before and failed, on average 6 times. Now, with mindfulness training, we dropped the bit about forcing and instead focused on being curious. In fact, we even told them to smoke. What? Yeah, we said, go ahead and smoke. Just be really curious about what it's like when you do. And what did they notice? Oh, here's an example from one of our smokers. She said, mindful smoking smells like stinky cheese and tastes like chemicals. Yuck. Now, she knew cognitively that smoking was bad for her. That's why she joined our program. What she discovered just by being curiously aware when she smoked was that smoking tastes like shit. Now, she moved from knowledge to wisdom. She moved from knowing in her head that smoking was bad for her to knowing it in her bones. And this spell of smoking was broken. She started to become disenchanted with her behavior. Now, the prefrontal cortex, that youngest part of our brain from an evolutionary perspective, it understands on an intellectual level that we shouldn't smoke. And it tries its hardest to help us change our behavior, to help us stop smoking, to help us stop eating that second, that third, that fourth cookie. We call this cognitive control. We're using cognition to control our behavior. Unfortunately, this is also the first part of our brain that goes offline when we get stressed out, which isn't that helpful. Now, we can all relate to this in our own experience. We're much more likely to do things like yell at our spouse or kids when we're stressed out or tired, even though we know it's not going to be helpful. We just can't help ourselves. Now, when the prefrontal cortex goes offline, we fall back into our old habits, which is why this disenchantment is so important. Seeing what we get from our habits helps us understand them in a deeper level, to know it in our bones, so we don't have to force ourselves to hold back or restrain ourselves from behavior. We're just less interested in doing it in the first place. And this is what mindfulness is all about. Seeing really clearly what we get when we get caught up in our behaviors, becoming disenchanted on a visceral level, and from this disenchanted stance, naturally letting go. This isn't to say that, poof, magically we quit smoking, but over time, as we learn to see more and more clearly the results of our actions, we let go of old habits and form new ones. The paradox here is that mindfulness is just about being really interested in getting close and personal with what's actually happening in our bodies and minds from moment to moment. This willingness to turn toward our experience rather than trying to make unpleasant cravings go away as quickly as possible. And this willingness to turn toward our experience is supported by curiosity, which is naturally rewarding. What does curiosity feel like? It feels good. And what happens when we get curious? We start to notice that cravings are simply made up of body sensations. Oh, there's tightness, there's tension, there's restlessness, and that these body sensations come and go. These are bite-sized pieces of experiences, that we can manage from moment to moment, rather than getting clobbered by this huge, scary craving that we choke on. In other words, when we get curious, we step out of our old fear-based reactive habit patterns and we step into being. We become this inner scientist where we're eagerly awaiting that next data point. Now, this might sound too simplistic to affect behavior, but in one study we found that mindfulness training was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking. So it actually works. And when we studied the brains of experienced meditators, we found that parts of a neural network of self-referential processing called the default mode network were at play. Now, one current hypothesis is that a region of this network called the posterior cingulate cortex is activated not necessarily by craving itself, but when we get caught up in it, when we get sucked in and it takes us for a ride. In contrast, when we let go, step out of the process just by being curiously aware of what's happening, this same brain region quiets down. Now we're testing app and online-based mindfulness training programs that target these core mechanisms. And ironically, use the same technology that's driving us to distraction to help us step out of our unhealthy habit patterns of smoking, of stress eating, and other addictive behaviors. Now remember that bit about context-dependent memory? We can deliver these tools to people's fingertips in the contexts that matter most. So we can help them tap into their inherent capacity to be curiously aware right when that urge to smoke or stress eat or whatever arises. So if you don't smoke or stress eat, maybe the next time you feel this urge to check your email when you're bored or you're trying to distract yourself from work, or maybe to compulsively respond to that text message when you're driving, see if you can tap into this natural capacity. Just be curiously aware of what's happening in your body and mind in that moment. It will just be another chance to perpetuate one of our endless and exhaustive habit loops, or step out of it. Instead of see text message, compulsively text back, feel a little bit better, notice the urge, get curious, feel the joy of letting go, and repeat. Thank you.
The links for these sources are also in the description.